Now. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Thank you for joining me and Tejas Patel here on another installment of the DA Perspective. I know that I haven't done a live show in a couple weeks. For those who had missed the coverage that I did of the protests here in Chicago, we did have some civil action happening in the streets and some other action happening in the streets. And I realized that while I was covering it previously, that there were no live feeds on the ground. So I felt it imperative to go out there and create it and get it. Plus, I also selfishly wanted to see it for myself because the narrative the media was spinning was something that they were creating in their own eyes. So I wanted to see it through my own lens as well. So that's why I've been absent for a while, but I have come back. We look a little different. The platform looks a little different now, and I also have Tejas here, a good friend of mine. Tejas, go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone.
Derek, thank you for having me on the show today. My name's Tejas Patel. I graduated DePaul University, just like Derek here. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in political science. I've been a congressional intern. I've worked in real estate management, and I watch what happens in politics with very open eyes.
Perfect. Yeah. So, how are you feeling during these tough times? Coronavirus has kind of thrown everyone for a loop. So, how are you feeling? How's everyone at home?
So it's interesting. I come from a family of healthcare professionals. Both of my parents are currently dealing with this crisis on the front lines, and it has completely, reshaped the medical industry and care in general. And they're watching it happen. They cannot give me another crisis of a medical nature in their lifetime that has ever caused something like this. I'm pretty much affected the same as everyone else, except I, have some family members that are in the thick of it, which I assume a lot of other people in Chicago and Illinois also are dealing with.
So I wanted to get so you're in northern, like the northern Chicagoland area, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So given everything that transpired after George Floyd's murder, what is your perception of everything that happened over the past, I would say, 9-10 days?
Me not being in the middle of Chicago and being in what I would call a highly progressive suburb of Chicago.
Did you say highly aggressive?
Progressive.
Oh, progressive. I was like, damn.
Okay. No. There's nothing aggressive about where I live. I found that, the consensus here, I think, was already made up years ago. I think that the people from around, where I live, they've reckoned with what's going on before this exact crisis, but they came out in troves. And one thing I saw, I went to a protest. It's the only one I went to, but it was only a mile away from my street, and it was just like many of the other protests I've ever been to, bar the obvious filter that is, we are in the middle of a pandemic. But the thing that was different about this protest, and I think that we're seeing this across the country too, this protest was started by 16, 17, and 18-year-olds at the local high school. You know what I mean?
Right.
That is momentous. This is not the people that have been fighting the long and hard fight, since the 60s. These are young kids that understand that the old way of doing things, the problematic policies that have persisted must be changed. And they really do understand it's on their shoulders. And I don't think I've ever seen that before. I went to Occupy as a high school kid. I was the youngest person there. When I went to this protest, I think I might have been one of the older people there, which is really good. I will have to say that there's boundless prosperity that comes from when young people stand up in troves. And it was like, it was every single subsection that, my region can provide to a protest, and being led by the young ones. and we followed them. You know, it's not that they set it up and you know, activists from different ages showed up, you know, to kind of guide us. No, these high school students took point, and that's the difference from what I'm seeing. What's going on now?
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No. Please,
yeah, no, that's exactly what I saw as well. I did see that it was kind of being led by the youth. And I mean, that's kind of like the old adage that it's like, it's the youth that changes the world. It's the mindsets that evolve and the desire for change, but also the willingness to go out and fight for it. And, you know, like, unfortunately, this is my personal view, I wish that as much as I'm really excited to see people in the street, I really am. I would, however, have much rather have seen a consolidated effort to get people to the ballot box, because I truly believe that that's where we actually make that substantial change. It's all good and well to go in the street and yell, or not so much yell, but to vocalize your desires and to demand them. Yeah. That's great. But the way that our democracy is set up, it's very simple. You go and you vote, and if the majority of the people are voting for the same cause, that cause essentially should be put into action. And if it doesn't, then I'm of the belief that then you can rightfully start burning shit to the ground, because that would mean that democracy is no longer being, you know, it's no longer functioning. But again, you know, we know that, and you and I were talking about this a little bit earlier. I mentioned Bernie Sanders, and everyone who's watched this before and has seen me on Bruce Dumont's show, Beyond the Beltway, shout out to Bruce Dumont, is I was an ardent Bernie supporter. And I don't want to conflate my support for Bernie Sanders as being of the cult of personality. It wasn't about him, the man, however much I do like him as a person. It was about the ideas, the progressive ideas, the idea that Medicare for all, or whatever you want to call it, the idea that in America, the wealthiest nation in the history of histories, it can't figure out how to give us all healthcare. But, you know, look at what just happened now. They figured out how to give, $4 or $5 trillion to large corporations, banks, and otherwise, who didn't really need that, should have probably handled their finances a little bit better and had a rainy day fund. So, ballot box. I really wish more people would have voted. Do you have any idea or insight as to why youth are so willing to go out into the streets but not willing to go vote?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you can't speak for everyone, but there is a disconnect from the streets to the ballot boxes. There always has been. I'm not saying that is a reason for why things don't change, but the youth that went out in the streets, I actually do believe, I guess I'm going to stick my leg out on this and say they're going to go to the ballot box.
I hope so now, yeah.
Yeah, you know, like, but that's not a fair thing for me to say, because it's, at the same time, it's kind of obvious that people are going to go to the ballot box no matter what this year, right?
Well, we hope so. We don't know that that's what they're going to do. It's projected.
That's true. That's projected. Yeah. Well, and that's what I'm saying. I'll go off what I've seen, which is, I don't know one person who said they're not going to vote. I know people that have concerns about who to vote for, or if their vote matters, or does this party actually encapsulate what I believe, or am I just doing it because it's the closest to what I believe? There's a lot of things like that out there, but I still think the buck stops at people showing up to vote. I think they will. Now, that being said, Bernie Sanders is a good example of big ideas, but they didn't come out to vote for him as much.
That's what I'm saying. You know, so essentially, kind of, again, what we were talking about earlier. Let me pull up this New York Times article. Or actually, let me pull up this clip from. This is going to be directly in line with what we're talking about right now. So, do you ever watch The Hill?
Yeah.
The Hill Rising. Yeah. So I'm a pretty big fan of those two. I appreciate that they're able to have conversations in direct opposition of each other, but still do it in a cordial manner. So let me pull up this clip. So we'll run through the first maybe minute and a half of this. Every week, what the Hill does, for those that don't know, they they do a segment called Media Screw Ups, or something to the effect of they're going over what the media either got wrong or what they're now apologizing or rescinding or whatever the case may be. So this one here, let me pull this up here. So this one is about the New York Times. It's titled Media Screw-Ups, New York Times op-ed writers admit Bernie had some good points. And that's why I'm playing this now. So let's give this a run.
So this is kind of funny. Brianna Joy Gray actually pointed this out. The New York Times is having some belated regrets, maybe, potentially, or at least signaling some remorse about their coverage of Bernie Sanders during the Democratic primary. You've got two different opinion writers who have kind of come out and been like, well, basically Bernie was right. Let's start with Charles Blow. We can throw this tweet up. Can we all just admit this? The transformational changes that COVID, the economic crisis, police brutality, and racial turbulence will force are precisely some of the things Bernie Sanders was talking about, but may have sounded too extreme to some just months ago. You also had in an op-ed Michelle Alexander writing, no matter what you think about Bernie Sanders, we all owe him and countless organizers a debt of gratitude for pushing universal health care, paid family leave, free college, $15 minimum wage, and many other economic rights into the mainstream. Nobody would have benefited more from Mr. Sanders' political revolution than black people, which was...
You're not hearing it, are you, Tejas? Okay, yeah.
No.
Give me 1 second. I'll loop it to you here, and we'll just rerun it again. But give me 1 second. So we are running. You're on 3. There we go. Tell me if you hear this. Give me 1 second.
Very much not a sentiment that we heard.
You hear it now?
Yeah.
All right, let's run it. So it was only a minute, so I'm going to go ahead and replay it so that Tejas can hear it as well. So it'll probably give everyone a better chance to hear it twice as well, too. So let me run it again.
So this is kind of funny. Brianna Joy Gray actually pointed this out. The New York Times is having some belated regrets, maybe, potentially, or at least signaling some remorse about their coverage of Bernie Sanders during the Democratic primary. You've got two different opinion writers who have kind of come out and been like, well, basically Bernie was right. Let's start with Charles Blow. We can throw this tweet up. Can we all just admit this? The transformational changes that COVID, the economic crisis, police brutality, and racial turbulence will force are precisely some of the things Bernie Sanders was talking about, but may have sounded too extreme to some just months ago. You also had in an op-ed Michelle Alexander writing, no matter what you think about Bernie Sanders, we all owe him and countless organizers a debt of gratitude for pushing universal health care, paid family leave, free college, $15 minimum wage, and many other economic rights into the mainstream. Nobody would have benefited more from Mr. Sanders' political revolution than black people, which was very much not a sentiment that we heard anyone in the mainstream media expressing during the primary. But now that he's done and gone and no longer a threat, suddenly we can all just admit it now.
You're
apparently
a visionary and a hero whenever you're dead and no longer...
Yeah.
There we go. Now I'm back. So we get the idea. So again, I played that because as we're talking about Bernie Sanders, I think that's the one thing that frustrates me the most right now. Again, it wasn't about him. As she covered in that op-ed that New York Times is now running, well, now we want to thank Bernie Sanders and all those people for the agenda that we're hoping the Democratic Party is going to actually adopt and implement. Because I was saying it throughout the entirety of the primary, and I want to actually say something. The primary, while Biden has the delegates now, the convention hasn't happened, and I'm not saying he's not going to be the candidate. I'm just saying the way that we talk about things, the narrative that we create around something dictates the way it actually will happen. So right now, everybody is acting like Joe Biden has it in the bag. Whatever he decides to do is the way it's all going to work out, like meaning the party platform. People forget that Bernie Sanders amassed a large enough amount of delegates to at least have the opportunity to shape the party platform. A big chunk of Democrats voted for this man. And you alluded to earlier that Bernie Sanders is not a Democrat. And that's true. He's not. He never said he was. You know, the Democrats just have a system that allows independents to caucus with them and subsequently run on their ballots. So, you know, if Democrats have a problem with an independent running on their ticket, maybe they should change the way their party platform or their party laws are governed. But again, I'm upset that everyone is now going to take credit for something that this man stuck his neck out for when it was unpopular. And I'm talking pre Hillary Clinton presidential run.
Oh, yeah. No,
you know what I mean?
You can go back to when he was the mayor of Burlington, Vermont, probably, and find a lot of these things, you know, that he's ran with his entire career. I will say this.
Yeah.
I do not believe that the collective political consciousness of the United States of America will forget Bernie Sanders when it comes to these, broad sweeping social, demands, I would call them, that the American people have right now. Nobody's going, oh, did Hillary think of that? Or was that, some of them, honestly, like I said, like the ACA was born out of, Obama maybe wanting universal health care. So I don't think that Bernie Sanders will be forgotten. But the one thing that you said that stuck out to me was your frustration. Frustration and Bernie Sanders supporters, to me, go hand in hand. And it's rightfully so. They picked a guy who who tried to use the Democratic Party as his catalyst for change, and it didn't work out. So what feelings are you going to have towards the Democratic Party?
Right.
That being said, my entire lifetime, there's only one party that would entertain any of this, and that was the Democratic Party. Right. So we have to balance out the historical relevance of a party that was willing to stick with the unions, and we'll talk about that later, or social change, or, that's the problem, is that are the young people leading on these sorts of things, or is an older, old guard of the party that's gonna take over a lot of these conversations? Yeah,
well, we know it's the old guard of the party. Look, and I probably shouldn't even use this as an example, because then they'll say, well, Bernie Sanders was also 70-something years old. But I think the difference is, look at the age of the voters, of the supporters. To me, that's what matters the most when I'm going to say what I'm about to say. If the Democratic Party wants to live and thrive in the future, it needs to cater to a voting base that isn't going to die in the next 20 years. And I know that's really harsh to say, but Biden is 77 years old, right? And the majority of his voters were older people. And if you look at Bernie Sanders, the majority of his voters, and here's the thing, why would you not go with the person who has proven to bring the most new people into the electorate, new voters? Why would you not want new blood into your party? You want that new blood to go to another party? Well, or you just want them to not vote at all?
I hear what you're saying there, and and what you're saying makes sense in a what I would say is a more long-term argument, which is, but if we look at the numbers of young people that voted for Bernie Sanders during the primary, right, they just couldn't beat the older voters that were in the Democratic Party. There was more of them, and they voted a higher frequency.
Right.
I remember. There's software that campaigns use that you're able to look up voters and see how they voted, and the most important thing is actually how often they voted, right? And the younger generation, if you're not going to change someone who's voted Democrat every single time they could for 60 years, over their life, and that person is going to continue to vote. So to your point, you have to be pulling in enough voters to beat out all of those people that have been voting one way or a specific. And I'm not going to say anything bad about the older voters of the Democratic Party, because we need them.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Right. No, I do. And again, I'm not discounting these people. I'm not saying that they don't matter in any sense. But what I'm saying is strategy. Okay. That is what drives me insane about the Democrats. Like now that I'll be 35 this month. Now that I'm like a third of my life is over and I'm still learning, and there's so much to learn, and there's so many more experiences that I have yet to have that other seasoned humans, mainly American voters, have already had. But I cannot understand the DNC's strategy going forward. I don't understand their strategy. Again, and we can speculate, and there's this whole speculation, as far as I'm concerned, that it's like a socialism versus capitalism thing, right? What Bernie Sanders was championing was socialist ideas without the disguise. Democrats, and even, as far back as FDR, everything that FDR put in the Green New Deal, or the New Deal, the Living New Deal, those were socialist policies. I mean, he created federal jobs for artists. That's a socialist program. Social Security, all these things. So that is disguised socialism. Okay, so call it whatever you want now, right? I think because Bernie Sanders was just like bringing that all back, and they had fought so long to kind of shove it down, like we'll just let Social Security and Medicare and these kind of programs kind of just chill, but nothing new for anyone, right?
Yeah. I want to fall back on. Obviously, we have a pandemic and then social or civil unrest. They play off each other. Mm-hmm. And coronavirus alone has changed our lives forever. Certain things are never going to happen again. There's an entire generation of people that were so affected by this. They'll be thinking about this in their lives like, America went to war with a country almost. Like they're going to be thinking in their heads, there's this period of time where life changed. I'm only 26 years old. So the closest thing I've ever seen to dramatic societal change is watching the 2008 crisis happen with the financial system. But that doesn't even compare. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. With that, you might know people who lost your job. With coronavirus, people lost their job. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah, there's that difference.
Yeah, and speaking of that, go ahead.
With that special point of time is where my optimism that big things can come from it. Maybe it's a weird form of optimism because historically,
I agree with you.
People would sweep it off to the side. But look at this. We can't be in groups of more than 10 people. When you take a walk outside and you want to just, enjoy some fresh air, when someone's coming down the sidewalk towards you, what do? You take a left or a right for the first time in your life. You don't walk by them.
Right. Well,
and
not to get racially charged, but there's been very many instances in American history where people will cross the street because a certain person.
No.
But I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. So
exactly.
No, but you know what? I agree with you. Okay, so I said something along the same lines when Trump was elected, right? In the sense that I grew up giving a shit about politics because for whatever reason, it just was always appealing to me. I think for me, it was the first reality TV show that I ever witnessed and am continuously witnessing. And the fact that it has such actual impact on our lives, like it doesn't get any more real in politics. And I wish people would just understand that and become more engaged. So when Trump was elected, I hoped that, every superhero movie needs a villain, right? And no one gives a shit until the villain is like destroying everything. And so because everyone had been so apathetic to the voting process for so long, here we are 4 years later. Like you alluded to earlier about people coming out in droves to vote now. Actually, I read an article earlier that despite all the shenanigans in Georgia, they had like a 3-time voter turnout, like a plus, like it's like
what I mean.
Yeah. So I to your point, I agree with you. I think that now there's some ashes, and I hope that a phoenix rises of some sort. Granted, I'm not. How do I say this? I will begrudgingly probably vote for Joe Biden, but that in no way means that I'm not going to allow that person to just remember how he told the dude, he told Charlemagne the God, like, if you don't vote for me, you're not black. Like it's that mentality that like you got it in the bag. Like this isn't for sure for you, man. Like you still need to work for this.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
And that's where
this is a common problem with our last, with Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton was taking for granted those that are a part of your base, that have been a part of your base. It's not enough to just know they're there, at the same comments on, was it Breakfast Club?
Yeah, it was Breakfast Club or Charlemagne's personal thing. Yeah.
Nobody agrees with that, right?
Right.
Nobody. I haven't found one person that goes, I agree with
But
that.
the fact that was his mentality and that he said it.
Yes. No, I see what you're saying there.
Yeah.
This is the weird part. If we were having this conversation either 8 years ago, right? I'd agree with everything you're saying. But we have these things that are pressing, right? We have a president that has honestly used force against, the American people.
Yeah.
Right? As someone who has a little military experience, they used to always rally cry in some of my college classes that, an order that's unconstitutional must not be followed, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people followed that order, and they issued. I look here and I look at Mattis and whoever the other one was that wrote a letter saying I shouldn't have been there. I politicized the military.
Yeah.
Too little, too late.
Yeah.
Too little, too late.
Yes.
I never. People say, how dare they use tear gas on protesters in the United States? And I go, look at the NATO protests. Look at all these protests that happened in this country. We use these what do they call it? Less than lethal.
Yeah, less than lethal.
You can't call them non-lethal.
Yeah, all
they use that.
Yeah, all things like tear gas is against the Geneva Conventions, if I'm not mistaken. Like you're not allowed to use that in warfare, yet we can use it at home against our own civilians. So, and that's the thing is like, okay, what is like you said, what is the most pressing issue? And how do I say this? If Trump got reelected, but we took back both houses of Congress, to me, that's a better win than losing the House, losing the Senate again, and then electing Joe Biden. Mm-hmm. Because that's a less powerful position to be in. And again, strategy. Right now, hold on though.
I have to disagree with you on that one.
Well,
yeah, okay.
Come on, a 2/3 majority vote trumps any executive order. Like the president is powerless against two houses of Congress that are voting in line.
You have to add an asterisk to everything you're saying in the sense that Donald Trump has proved us wrong about the power of the president with an attorney general that sits hand in bar. I'm not saying we're going to do that.
No,
but
the only reason he's been able to do that though is because the more powerful of the two houses is the Senate, and he's had that the entire time. So again,
that's one way to look at it.
So again, that is the only. I'm sorry, but that is not to be like forceful, but that is the only way to look at it, as far as I'm concerned. When I read how our Constitution is set up and how our government is structured, with our three branches of government. The president is nothing more than a figurehead. If you put him in that place because you have the power of Congress. Congress is supposed to be checking the president. But
no, I agree with you on that.
With previous presidents, we've eroded that check by giving the president increasing powers. Like for instance, Congress hasn't declared war on anyone in a very long time. Yet have we not been continuously going to war and or funding proxy wars? Right now, to include Obama, right now, we sell munitions to countries that we know are using them in wars, mainly Saudi Arabia, that we're fighting a proxy war in Yemen, and now increasingly in Africa. And it has been even before I left the military because of terrorism, right? And that's fine. I'm not saying like we should let terrorism happen, but again, we got money for war, but we can't feed the poor, and I think that's where my fight comes in, because it's everybody is screaming Trump, fire Trump. Everything's on fire, Trump, and I'm like, Look at all these other fires that are way bigger than this guy's deranged ego. Yeah.
Derek, I see your point on that. And what I meant by I didn't, per the Constitution, you're 100% correct. And to go back on your point, the erosion, I would call it the grand distraction, right? The American people are way too distracted to take, like, how many people even own a Constitution?
Oh, you got a pocket Constitution? Nice. Yeah, I like it.
One. And that's my point is the American people right now, yes, it's right to be upset at Trump. It is right to go out and protest. But you know what's not right? Staying home in November. Staying home is what is, and this is the thing. We're not even arguing.
No, we're not. No, and so this is okay, and so this is
to get there.
Yeah, and so this is kind of like, so my dad, my dad and I, we have political discussions all the time, and my dad and I, we want the same end result, but we have a different pathway that we think we can get there, and that's what I'm finding is happening with a lot of people. And I think back to the Bernie Sanders thing, I think that's why he was allowed to be so welcomed into the Democratic Party, because again, the Democratic Party on face value is the party of the people, is the party of progressive change, it's supposed to be, right? In action, it's not. But the voters believe that it is. They continue to believe that these people give a shit about them because there's only two teams, right? Red team clearly doesn't give a shit about you. They don't want you as a woman to control your own body. They don't think, you should have health care, just a whole bunch of other shit, right? So and that's one thing that I give the red team actual respect and credit for, is because they don't tell you they don't give a shit about you behind your back. They do it to your face. And I respect that, because now I can actually have a conversation with you. The Democrats, on the other hand, they come out. Did you see the kente cloth thing? Did you see the kneeling with the kente cloth? Okay.
Yeah, the kneel.
And listen, I heard two reports on that, okay? I heard a report that the Black Caucus asked them to do it, and then I heard other reports that they just did it, right? To me, all I saw was pander mode 5,000. And that, to me, is how they have continued to convince people who vote blue normally that they care about them. It's the pander mode turns on, some big thing happens and everyone comes out to address it. Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer. I mean, this goes all the way back, right, to previous Dems. And they do the same thing. It's just a cycle. But in the back, when they go to these fundraisers for Northrop Grumman, defense contractors, right, Boeing, these people, the tables have the red and the blue team leaders at the same table, and they're taking the same money. And that's like where,
Well, okay. That's interesting. I will say this. To make a meaningful point as an elected official at the highest levels is a minefield. And I'm giving them sympathy. I'm giving them sympathy as a former, intern.
Yeah, because you worked in there, right?
I see. I was only in the district office, but I was there for the recess, and I can't really go into details, but I can see what showed up on TV and what the try was, right? And I can see when something hits well, and all of us are surprised in the, you know what I mean? It's. I will say this: the United States Congress right now is filled with some of the most progressive Democrats we've ever seen. More than we've ever seen. And I know I'm making a point that we've never been safer than at this point on earth, right? But it's easy to forget that in this madness. It's easy to, we have two parties right now, right?
Okay.
One of them stood silently, pretty much silently, as they cleared off a lawn of peaceful protesters, right? I didn't see the angered press conferences of Republican congressmen that could not stand to see their people march, could not see their people tread upon, right?
Right.
But now, that's where my heart sits with the Democratic Party for those reasons. The things you brought up are real criticism of a campaign finance crisis. There is Bernie Sanders, right, is probably one of the few people that has been very transparent with his donations. Joe Biden isn't going to be. Most politicians at the upper echelons aren't going to be clear with that.
Right.
And why? Because they don't get to exist if they don't get the money. And who has the money? Unfortunately, it's not the $5 donations that go to Bernie Sanders. The rest of the money comes from big corporations that have so much control.
And I think that, and so it's incumbent upon, and this is why I started this show, and this is why I continue to piss off everyone who tries to be my friend, because nobody ever wants to talk politics, but that's all I ever want to do, because all I want to do is change the world. And so it's seriously. So, I'm telling people hey, you need to be paying attention to who's running in your district, and you can't just focus on the presidential race or even the Senate race.
You absolutely cannot.
The one stat, and I have to update this in my mind, but this is the one figure that sticks into my mind. The 2012 election for Congress, 23% of the nation voted or something like that. Exactly. I don't imagine the number now is much higher. So even outside of presidential years, important races are happening and everyone just ghosts on it. And part of it is by design, right? Part of it is the media's lack of coverage, because and there are way more there are way more educated people who can speak to this than I. But this whole ecosystem of the donor class, the politicians, and how the media all work together to create this machine that is so hard to subvert. And I think that's where, and I'll probably say his name 30 more times, but I think that's where the whole Bernie Sanders thing was him being derailed twice was just a knife through the heart, man, because we were so close. So at least how I feel, we were so
comes back
close.
To the word frustration.
So close. So he just actually did. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, honestly, Oxford Dictionary should put a definition next to frustration, which is when
it's just
Bernie Sanders
picture of Bernie voters.
That's really, I can't, I was never 100% on the Bernie.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's just my politics. I don't know. But I am not one of those people that's going to just say, just count him out, especially for his ideas. You know what I mean? I think that goes to how we talk about politics again, is that we want to be right, and we don't even want to mention, I kind of agree with that, or I half agree with that, or maybe that's the right idea, but it's not going to happen now. We skip all of those conversations and go straight to, you're wrong, I'm right, get out of my house.
Yeah. Seriously. Okay, so I'll give you an example. There's a Representative Thomas Massey. He's a Republican from Kentucky, okay? As soon as you say Republican from Kentucky, half the country, well, not even half, half of the half shuts down, right? He has something called, that he's been trying to push through for quite some time. It's called the Prime Act, right? And basically, the Prime Act would alleviate, do you remember when the Prime Act would allow local farmers to sell to people in their local area without all of the USDA regulations that we have now. I don't want to butcher it, but that's the idea. Sure. So there are some local farms who have to drive, or truck rather, they truck their meat hundreds of miles away to a USDA facility to be inspected, instead of changing the way that we do those things. So anyways, something like that benefits a lot of people on both sides of the aisle. Right. So I, as someone who's I'm kind of calling it Team Purple, but, meaning in the middle, right? Between red and blue, right? That's how I feel, really. Yeah. It's a non-starter for a lot of people. Like I said, as soon as you say, hey, this Republican person from Kentucky, lawmaker, they're like, shut it down. I don't even want to hear it. And it's just how are we going to get anything done?
I understand that sentiment. To go up, just that specific guy, I don't know the complexities of that bill, but he also is the guy that made everybody fly back to DC to vote on the funding during the middle of a crisis in a large room filled with people and you know what? A lot of people say, who cares about the congressmen? They are so powerful, let them go back. But at the same time, anybody who's been around those congressmen that had to go there, you know what I mean? It's a pandemic. Things have changed.
Right.
So to your point on shutting things down before they even start when it comes to conversation, that's where we are right now. I'm willing to say, though, that some things are changing. With these protests that have gone on and the demographics and I'm sure you've scrolled down your social media feeds and seen someone who was 100% for it that you never thought would really put their leg out there and say, Black Lives Matter or justice for George Floyd. I've seen more of that. Maybe that's just my feed.
Yeah.
But it seems, well, actually, I'm going to stick my neck out in this one and say that the people and their ideas in this country move so much faster than the actual politics.
Well, yeah.
And so.
But that's only because
it's hard to look at.
That's only because they're not voting. If they would vote, we could have this shit fixed yesterday. It's that. So simple. It is so simple.
I agree with
Because you know what? It's not. And what I've realized, because I jumped on Twitter when I started doing this show, and more so in the past few months, I would say I've jumped on Twitter, and I started following all these different politicians, these down ballot candidates, and and what I've realized is it's not for lack of progressive candidates or even just candidates that believe what you believe. It's for lack of people going out and voting for them. It's really that simple. Like, for instance, right now, is his name Budar, the guy he's running against Pelosi. I'm gonna pull him up.
Oh, yeah, no, I know.
You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, like the guy's.
I do.
Yeah, the guy's kind of dope. Like, I actually really like this dude. He like talks like a normal person. And obviously it's the Twitter sphere, but like he's going hard in the paint at Pelosi and calling her out on her bullshit. And
Shahid
Buttar. Yeah. So, he's not going to win. I want him to win so bad, right? If Bernie Sanders can't beat the shit twice, I really have little hope that, but what's his first name? The guy? Shahid? Yeah.
Shahid.
I have little faith that Shahid's going to win. However, I'm liking his shit, hoping that the algorithm pumps him in front of more people. So, I don't live in his district. I can't vote for him.
Right.
So, but
hey, listen, I come from the district of Jan Schakowsky, right? She's been there since the 90s or early 2000s. It's kind of a lifetime sort of deal. Now, if you ask me, do I have any specific reasons for being 100% against Jan Schakowsky? I don't. But going off the point of new ideas come with new people, right? A lot of the time. And so when I look at Jan Schakowsky, I don't want to have a political revolution against her, but there should be some cognizance in this, how do you say it? There should be some cognizance in the elected officials to know after a certain amount of time, it might be time to let some new things come up.
So to that point, so two things. A, do you believe that after X number of years of inaction, you should be ousted? And B, do you believe that we should have congressional term limits?
Okay, so A, I would agree with you if I knew how the system worked. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and obviously saying that without like metrics to measure against is like, but the reality is, and again, and Bernie Sanders just got on the Senate floor a couple days ago and said the words "Do nothing, Congress," called out everyone to include, and he said everyone of this body, so that included himself. And there's a lot of people who believe that he shouldn't have voted for that first bailout package, the Corona one. He should have been the one that did the Massey that made stood his ground and created a stink and all that shit. And he could have done that. And I wish he would have done that. Like, I'm at the point now where it's like, well, hell, what the hell are we trying to save this thing for? Like, let's burn it to the ground, like politically, like create that third party, like scare the shit out of people to come out and vote. You know what I mean? Like, I'm down with that. Like, he should go down in flames. And I think he's just too scared, like everyone else, about Trump getting elected again. But, yeah, Congress has not acted in quite some time, whether blue team or red team.
So point A, if there were metrics to how to do it, I'd probably support it. But it's an abstract idea right now that's hard for me to get. Like, are we gonna be able to impeach our congressman? Are you gonna have a recall vote?
Oh, well, I just mean voting them out, man.
Works.
I mean, like voting them out, you know? Like, I don't feel like there's anyone challenging, right? Like, again, everything to me is voting. Like, there's no challenge to these people. And again, it's because, like we said, young people don't come out and vote. Everyone on Twitter talks mad shit about Nancy Pelosi. Are these people actually showing up to vote? I don't think so, because she's still in power. And she's been there for, like, however many years, like, way too long, right?
Yeah, no.
And so, so that's what I mean when I say, like, inaction. Because, again, we've seen the wealth divide grow, right? We've seen the accumulation of wealth go straight to the top 1%. Did you ever see someone made this graphic? It was like a Bezos graphic, and it showed how much money he has. And, like, you scroll through it. Did you see that? Okay, so
no, I'm not sure.
I'll try to find it later and send it to you. But it was like I don't know how to explain it. It was almost like a slideshow kind of thing, or like a web page or something, and it had blocks, right? Just colored blocks. And each colored block, like, it got progressively bigger and longer to show you, like, physically, I guess, if that makes sense, or visually rather, what his wealth was in relation to other wealth. Like $100 million was like a good sized chunk like this. And his money, dude, you just kept scrolling. It was insane. It was insane.
No, it doesn't make sense.
And again, look, I don't hate rich people. I'm not saying you shouldn't have the ability to accumulate wealth legally, like, as fast as you can, or however the case may be. But the reality is that our Congress, pretty much since we left the gold standard, has created this fictitious economy that runs off of not real money, okay? And in addition to that, they've lined their pockets, the politicians, they've lined their pockets while allowing small groups of people within our country to amass enormous wealth. And to me, that's what I mean when I say inaction. Nothing has been done, right? The problems that we had when I was born in 1985 are still the problems now, with the exception of a few things. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no. I see what you're saying there. So the second point was congressional term limits. I think, from seeing, for a short amount of time how it works close up a little bit, 2 years isn't enough to do anything but campaign.
Fair.
And so that's where I sit in this weird part, because these senators get so much. They get to sit down, build foundations, follow bills for years, try to get something done, or they do exactly what you're saying, which is absolutely nothing. But these congressmen don't even get that chance, because by the time they're in office, they're running again. Then they have to split their time between staying in office and doing stuff for the people that they want to, right? Most of the things I did in that office were follow up on veterans benefits, Medicare, immigration problems, of the constituents, right? It was real constituent work. I can't imagine if a congressman disappeared and a new one came in and didn't care and left all those cases to just disappear or just sit in a closet somewhere. So when it comes to congressional term limits, I believe there should be more time in office, but you should be limited to how many times you are in office.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, like, maybe you get 2 3 years. It should be limited. Senators, I don't think you should get more than 2, to be honest. That amount of time, so many things can change. You know what I mean?
And I'll even I'll even do the senators a solid, because I think in my number, I'm thinking like 15 to 20, right? And the only reason I say that is one of the things, like when I was in the military, was that there was so much to learn from people who had been there the longest. And so, almost like passing the torch, right? So we need that, right? Our government, is a couple hundred years old, and we, obviously the people aren't 100 years old, but how do you pass on a couple hundred years worth of the workings of the government within 2 years, right? So I'm thinking 12 to 20. Thinking 15 is the sweet spot. Serve your country for 15 years. and then get the fuck out of there, and then and figure out who the next leaders of America are. You know what I mean?
And let's make sure to put on there that you are not allowed to do anything close to lobby.
Oh, when you're done.
After you leave
yeah,
office.
The revolving door shit. That shit's, dude. That's
not. I would need to point that out. I am not a far left, progressive. This should be a Republicans and Democrats agree.
Purple team.
And it's hard to ask the Republicans and Democrats that are in the current system to agree on this, right? But if you ask someone who's been out and doesn't care, they'll agree with you. If you ask someone who's not in yet, they'll agree with you. It's the people that are already there that do not want to play that game because it's a lot of money.
Well, okay,
frankly.
so I've heard some people say that we should pay them more so that they'll be less inclined to take money elsewhere.
The government will never pay someone more than they can get in, the private side of the United States of America.
So how do you think
that's
go ahead.
That point is most emphasized by judges in this, right? If you're qualified to be a judge in the United States of America, you have made the decision to make far less money than the private sector. You might have traded it for power. I will allow that criticism to sit there. You probably did, but at the same time, you have a lot of power as a very, very esteemed, high at their profession job as a lawyer at the head of a firm or something. Yeah. So I don't believe that money is going to fix the problem.
Like throwing more money at it. Yeah. So there's got to be a way though. There's got to be a way to get money out of politics, and I believe there is a way somehow. Andrew Yang, shout out to the Yang Gang. One of his proposals was democracy dollars or freedom bucks or something like that. Yes. You remember that? So for people that don't know, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tejas, it was everyone gets a set amount of these dollars every year, and they can only be used towards donating to your preferred candidate, and that's how elections would be funded. So, I mean, I think that could help a little bit.
Listen, the federal system actually has a system set up already.
Yeah, the presidential election fund or something like that.
But where you get a certain amount of money if you don't ask for a certain amount of money and whatnot. Okay. That's a terrible way of describing it. But basically, something exists because I like to remind people, for every bad actor in government, there's a bunch of people that could have done something way crazier with their lives but decided they want to do this. There's an EPA administrator who decided to hang on during a time when someone doesn't want the EPA to exist runs the EPA. Right. And so I ask myself when I look at the proposal of Andrew Yang, if that is what will solve the problem. And I still turn back to the fact that a new system, we can reform certain parts of the system more easily than others. And I think that's a conflation that Americans are having a really hard time with, because some things need to be changed. I would argue a lot of the idea of law enforcement in the United States of America is due for some sort of large scale change.
Which is
now how we do it is going to be the question for weeks and months and years to come. My answer is going to be different from your answer, and everyone else's answer is going to be different from ours.
Well, that's a great segue into what I was going to go into next, was the whole defund the police movement. I haven't, unfortunately, I haven't read as much on it as I'd like. Not the defund part. Camden, New Jersey, if I'm not mistaken, had already done so previously. And then now we have, who was it? Who just voted to do it? Why am I blanking?
Minneapolis has, but I don't think they've actually voted to do it. I think they have the votes. I'm not.
Well, yeah. Well, it's sure. No, I think they voted because they had a veto-proof majority. But I think let me see if the procedural vote went through. But so what I was going to say was, so what do you think? How do you think that policing should be altered to be more human friendly, I guess, for lack of better way to put it?
Well, I think the obvious thing, which is something that pretty much everyone agrees upon, is a accountability board that is allowed to hold them accountable, right? I think there's 7 aldermen holding that up in the city. And I can see why they're holding it up. I mean, it people's allegiances are so on the front steps of their house these days. Mm-hmm. It's so obvious. You know, you're not hiding it anymore, right? But at the same time, I look at defunding the police, and I ask if they called it the reallocation of
resources
to social justice and community health.
Yes.
Public funds, you know, would more people agree with it? I don't know. I look at that. Let me rephrase all this. It's the first time in my life that I would see something like defund the police at face and give it the time of day. That's how we're moving.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like,
yes.
Right.
Yes. And that was 1 of the
years ago. If you said defund the police, people would look at you like you're this anti-cop militant. You know what I mean?
Radical, like
days,
you're just. Yeah.
I saw it on CNN. I saw it on Fox. People are talking about it. So there must be something to it. I just don't know what. Right? We're going to see how communities across America decide to defund their police departments or decide to reallocate funds to certain areas. And we're going to see how those very police who serve there, whether they decide to stay, whether they agree with these things. Right now, they're vocally against it, right?
Yep.
You can see across the board, no one says defund us, but no one's ever going to say that.
Right.
You know?
Well,
and have to wait till the policy's been enacted.
Yeah,
to see how people feel.
And that's a couple things from that. I do marketing now. That's what I do, communications, and I'm conflicted as far as 2 things. One of the things that you said was, I'm talking about it now. I saw it on CNN. Defund the police is like a buzz phrase now, you know? It invokes a conversation, but also invokes a lot of other things. But it definitely invoked a conversation. And so at face value, that's half the battle, because as we were talking about before, everyone's so apathetic to anything political, anything government, anything that has to do with what they should be paying attention to. People don't want to deal with it, right? So, but at the same time, I wish there was a way that we could have the best of both worlds, right? I wish we could have the shock value of saying defund the police and everyone's like, whoa, but also have the finesse of reallocate police funds to education, to what is it called for when you're building neighborhoods? What's that? What is it called? Like the people that are like architects, like man, what is it called?
Equity?
Huh?
Equity?
No. Like the literal actual like building neighborhoods, like the design, like the roads and the parks and all that stuff. I can't remember what it's called. But anyways, building better communities, reallocating resources to building better communities. Urban planning and development. Is that what it's called?
Yes. There you go. Yes.
That's what it's called. So it's a little slow, but it still works. So yeah, I wish that it was both, you know? And so here I sit, right? I live in a very nuanced world, okay? I converse quite frequently, and everything is nuanced. The problem is I live in a nuanced world. Everyone else does not. Everyone else says, you said these 5 words together. That's what I heard. That's what I'm telling everyone in the world you said. No nuance, no context. Nothing else gets to go with that. And so I think that's where I'm like, defund the police is great because it perked everyone's ears, but defund the police sucks because it turns all these people off who we need to buy into the idea, which is the police themselves, you know? And, you know, and not just the police, but others who are, you know, super blue friendly, cop blue. Yeah.
I seem, I struggle with the idea of holding the door open for someone I don't like.
Okay.
And that's something that we need to do. Because we everybody's going to be in that room either way, right?
Yeah, seriously. They're going to get in there whether you hold the door for them or not.
Exactly.
But at least if you hold the door for them, they might, you know, take a liking to you a little bit.
Well, I mean, I see that the city budgeted $1.8 billion to the Chicago Police Department in 2020. And according to Chicago's budget overview, it comprises about 40%
Yeah, it's
of the
40%.
city's operating budget. So, so let's take a look at that 40%. All this is, you know what? It's not up to me and how it's messaged. But I will say this: if they take a look at the 40% and decide that there's better ways to spend it, I'm not in disagreement. And that is, that's not hating police. That's not, that is, hey, that's looking at a budget. You know what I mean? We do it. I mean, I know people in Illinois aren't used to that, right?
Right.
But I think there's more than enough time for that. And listen, we've got 9 aldermen that say they'll support it and are examining it. That's more than have ever said so.
And the thing is too is when we're talking, well, and I'll say we, because I do. I want to reallocate some of the resources and money and funds that's going to the police. Why do I feel that way? Because when I went to Iraq twice and I came home, I didn't expect to see the same fucking shit that I was using in Iraq being worn by these people here. If I was overseas fighting an enemy using this equipment, why didn't you just tell me to fight the enemy here if you're using the same equipment? Because there is no enemy here. We are Americans. Yeah. We're civilians. We're citizens. We're not the enemy here. So you should not be having these tools of war. And like I watched a video earlier today. I mean, these guys they were wearing like fatigues and shit. They were sheriffs, Like, when did we just stop having police wear like readily identifiable uniforms? Why are they running around in camo and shit? Or, I use camo like it's not camo anymore, but everyone knows what I mean when I say that. But why are they running around with battle dress on in fucking Naperville, Illinois? Why do they have? I read something today. School cops. I don't know the district. I should have had it. Doesn't matter. School police were going to give back their grenade launchers. Why does the school police? Why did they have them in the first place? Who was like, you know what? Yeah. You know what our school district needs to keep these kids safe? 34 grenade launchers. And so when we say defund the police, that's what when I say defund the police or when I say reallocate resources for the police, that's what I'm talking about. They don't need the battle gear. They don't need that shit.
Derek, I think a lot of people agree with you on that. I don't think, and this is the thing, is like, why are we running a race to see who agrees with a principle more than others? If at face we got a guy that's been to Iraq twice that's saying this is nuts, you know what I mean? Like,
and I'm not the only one.
I have none of those experiences, and I believe the same thing as you.
Exactly.
There must be more things that are possible like that.
Yeah, no, there definitely is. And again, I think that it goes down to communication. It's to me the one thing that I found that has been fundamental in breaking down human interaction to a negative place and building up human interaction to a positive place. Those two things all fall down to communication. Because for me, inherently, I think humans have very similar shared interests. At our core, we have very animalistic beliefs as far as like not being able to control them with consciousness. You know what I mean? Like love and respect and shelter and like pride, like these kind of things. Like we mostly don't control those things or the desire for them or the need. It's all this extra shit that we've created for ourselves, like Keynesian economics. No, just kidding. But it's all these other things that we've created for ourselves. That has complicated all of this. So if we could literally just like sit down together, chill, maybe smoke a blunt if that's your prerogative, and like just talk to each other. Because like you said, probably most people that you would talk to would say, you know what? I don't think the school police do need grenade launchers. And, like, I don't think that's a tough sell.
Now, here's a little background I have in my head on how that kind of works. You know, a lot of departments, I think, actually got it from the military through a federal program.
No, they did 100%. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So it doesn't. You know, you look to the police and you go, "Why are you doing this?" Well, look to the federal government to ask why they offered that. You know what I mean? What does the federal government?
Both though.
Why do they want that?
But it's both.
Yeah.
It's both, right? Like it's almost like I can go to jail for buying stolen goods, right? Why did you buy that if you couldn't verify where it came from, right? So the police are, yes, just as fault for buying weapons of war, knowing that there's no war here, as much as, again,
for giving them a discount.
Yeah.
Because they got a discount.
Because they got a good deal. I got
they bought it in the first place. When are you going to get some of this stuff for a discount? Unless the government calls you and says, "Hey, we have a program."
I know.
And if you're interested,
no, I know.
Here it is. I can't imagine, from your perspective, walking out through those protests and seeing the National Guard hanging out, let alone a police officer in whatever you called it, camo or
the battle dress.
Whatever,
yeah, the battle dress.
Listen, we've gone past debating whether or not an AR-15 is a weapon of war when someone is dressed up for war. Seriously.
Yeah, it's just, and you know what? I'll be honest with you, and this is not because I'm expecting some armed insurrection, or I think that's the right word to use in this context. This is the first time since I've left the military that I'm going to buy a gun, because I just I have not felt that ever since I left the military. I felt completely safe. I felt like everything was under control. The military had it. The police force locally, they all had it. Everything was cool. And after all this shit started unraveling, I was just like, I'm the kind of person where it's like, I'd rather have and not need than need and not have. So I hope that I buy this piece and I never have to touch it. I would, for the rest of my life, I would die a very happy person having never to touched it. But I'm at the point where it's like, I feel like I need this for my protection and for the protection of those around me. And I feel like almost a responsibility to have it, given my prior training, knowing that I might be one of the best trained people in the area to protect everyone else, you know?
Yeah.
It sucks.
Here's the interesting thing is, I think a lot of Americans agree with you. I think that's showing because the stock market had a bad day, I think yesterday or the day before, and one of the only stocks that I saw that was skyrocketing was Smith & Wesson, right? Went straight up. Formerly American Outdoor Brands Corporation. Yeah. But I looked at that and I couldn't be surprised, right? Could you?
No.
Could you? I mean, I am a man who's never owned a gun, has never fired a gun. I may have held one at one point. Like
off the record.
A rifle.
Yeah.
Maybe I held a hunting rifle or something. I don't even remember that. But I looked at the lines on WGN News of people who are waiting to go buy guns after what they saw in the first few days of the protest. Listen, I bet a lot of those people might be from some of the areas that were most affected. You know, it's not that the idea that a gun is meant for only nefarious things, even as a diehard liberal, I know is wrong. But that being said, I am most comfortable with someone like you saying, I'm about to go get a gun, because I know you have more training than the average person, right? So if you were someone else, I might be going, wait, hold on there, Joe. You know, like, but Derek, I know you have the experience, right? And so I've got a weird opinion on that, and that is that a while back, I guess there were EMTs in the city of Chicago that were kind of pushing to hold guns because there was a trend going on where people would call 911 and rob the first responders or something. But that was stopped because they have an oath. You know, how do you carry out that Hippocratic oath?
Hippocratic oath,
with a gun on you.
Yeah.
And you can't, right? They're at odds. You have something that will end someone. It's a tool to end life or severely damage it. And then you physically, as a person, are the tool to stop that. So I can see why those things can't connect. Yeah. But to the average American, I I will say this: you can buy a gun, and if I hope you get the training to use it correctly and safely for the right reasons. But going back to your original point from a few minutes ago, your vote's probably going to do more for you.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Like I felt comfortable being protected by the votes until now, till I see that. I'm not saying my vote didn't matter because Bernie Sanders didn't win or anything, but you can see how a lot of people, like millions of people who donated to that man and voted for that man, could feel that the structural integrity of their government didn't work for them. And
sure.
One of the main tenets of the amendment that allows you to own firearms was for protection from a government aggressing upon you. So, that's not my sole reason for getting it. I don't think the government's coming for me or anything. Again, it's more of just like, man, shit's kind of getting crazy, and rather have, I'd rather have than not. So, yeah, it's unfortunate, but I will say I since we're talking about guns, I didn't even plan on it, but we can. I definitely am for like gun laws that prohibit certain individuals from obtaining them and or certain weapons of war from being sold to the public. And I know one of the things everyone's always like with AR-15s or M4s is what we had in the service. I can't buy a tank, because it's a weapon of war. Do you remember Pepsi? You might be a little young. He's like, yes, I remember Pepsi. Do you remember Pepsi was giving away a Harrier fighter jet? And
yes, I do.
Okay, so you remember that,
they got
right?
sued for it.
All right. They ruled that the guy couldn't have the jet, even though he amassed the points to get it, because it was a weapon of war. And no one in this country is allowed to have a weapon of war. So if you send me to war twice and you give me this weapon, the main weapon, not even the 9mm, that was like a byproduct. The 9mm was like, in case your main weapon takes a shit, this is your last resort to save your life, Then why are you not still perceiving it the same way when we're here stateside? Because you call it a different name? Because it's not an M4 carbine, now it's an AR-15.
Yeah, no,
I struggle with that, and I have a lot of friends who have them, and that would be a very tough conversation for us to have in person. Like, I don't think you should be having that.
I'm sitting here and I'm thinking like, because I have conservative friends, and I hear, they'll make all these points. It's not fully automatic. Right. I could never buy one of those, or it'd take me lots of, me jumping through hoops with the FBI. Right.
I'm getting water. I'm listening. I'm getting water.
To get one of those. But I can't imagine. There's just some items out there that you can't imagine you need. I personally just do not understand why you need when you need the extended clips, right?
Yeah.
I even for me, I can understand the semi-automatic, they've been around for so long and there's so many out there. Like, honestly, if the government were to ban AR-15s tomorrow, there'd be enough on the street to sell and resell like it was a normal business.
Yeah, it would still happen. Yeah.
But when it comes to an extended mag, like, are you going to go hunt a deer with
64 rounds or whatever?
How many bullets do you need to hunt a deer, right? 60?
Yeah, whatever it is. I don't even know what it is. I just know you don't need it. So the thing is too, so then, yeah, seriously. So I'm on like two ends, right? So here's my other thought. And here's the thing is like, I'm, as much as like I'm pretty steadfast in the things I believe in, I'm also still a malleable human, right? As far as what I believe in. So if the time comes that gun advocates have this rock fucking solid argument as to why we need these weapons of war here, well then fuck it. Let's have a conversation. If you persuade me, I'm down. I'm down to be persuaded. So the other side of me is like, okay, if we're only gonna have a sprinkling of people running around with these, then everybody gets one. Because, in contrast, when I was deployed, every house, everyone had an AK. All the Iraqis, every fucking one of them. they were not shooting each other. There was no kids running up in the villages and just fucking murking people, you know, like we have with school shootings and shit here, right? So it's like, okay, we either get everybody one so that it becomes normalized and everyone's just like chill with it, you know, because I grew up with guns. Like I was shooting shit before I joined the military. I didn't even want to join the military in the first place. It wasn't even my thing. So, you know, I grew up with guns. And so when I hear gun advocates, I also, for people who don't know, I grew up in Texas, a little like San Antonio, Texas, and Brownsville, Texas. I got family down there. So yeah, guns was everywhere. Right. And so when advocates say, well, you know, most people who are opposed to guns, it's because they don't have any training with them. They didn't grow up with them. You know, guns don't kill people. People kill people. I can't say they're lying. I can't say they're wrong because I firsthand understand that. You know, so I take that into account with how I'm trying to figure out what the right answer is. If the right answer is created with the intention of preventing school shootings or Dylan Roof going into a church and having a service with people and then fucking offing them, like, I don't know how to prevent that other than to take that thing away or to give everyone that thing. I don't know. Listen, I don't know.
As someone with, like I said, zero experience with firearms, that's what I defer to. And that's what I think most people with zero experience in firearms will defer to. And until there's a digestible argument that, you know, doesn't give you heartburn, I don't know what we're gonna do about that. You're gonna have people sitting in each corner. Now, I will say this: you look at other countries, right? You look at other countries and how they handled guns, and most of them, people will make the valid argument you can't even compare us to them. But then I look at was it Australia that clamped down on them?
Oh, it was New Zealand, wasn't it?
Shooting?
I think it was New Zealand.
Oh, maybe it was New Zealand.
I could be wrong.
I thought Australia did something too similar, where they had a shooting and they said that's it. And you know what? The government didn't fall, and the country didn't end. And the people right now, I'm sure there's tons of vocally angry people in that country, but they're not dictating the policies.
Right. Yeah, I think it was Australia. I think you got it right. No, I know, and that's the thing. Like I started watching this guy because, like I said, I made the decision that I was gonna get a sidearm, and so I started like looking up some stuff on YouTube. I kind of have an idea of what I'm gonna buy because I had already shot it. It was it's called in the military it's an M11. On the streets it's a Sig Sauer something. I don't even know the number.
Yeah.
But and I'll be honest, man, it's like the best damn gun I've ever shot in my life. It's like shooting a stick of butter, dude. It's so smooth, you know, and it's like, I don't hate it. But you know, so anyways, I started watching some stuff on YouTube, you know, about it and all this stuff. So then YouTube starts throwing gun channels at me. And there's this guy, I forget his name, but he's got a fuck ton of subscribers and the production value on his videos are awesome. And the guy is so cool. He's such a nice guy, and he's like got a great attitude, and like he looks good, and it's like everything's great about it. And he's just shooting guns, you know, and he's like doing stuff, you know. And it's like, I don't want to like be the guy who kills all that good vibe, you know. But at the same time, I make decisions for the greater good. So if this guy has to lose his channel. But granted, and a lot of on his channel is like sidearms and stuff too. But anyways, I know there's a whole culture of people. There's a whole gun culture. There's a whole, you know, whatever. But like we were saying earlier, what were we talking about earlier? Where we were saying, you know, oh, it was something, the Confederacy. Where what were you talking about? And I said something about the Confederacy. Everyone thought that was the right thing to do, but it wasn't. Just because the majority ruled in this area didn't mean that it was like right. I can't remember what you were talking about previously before it though. But again, in the same instance, you know, right? You have a lot of people who believe that this thing is okay and this thing is right. And I know it's a very tough sell to come in and be like, hey guys, so we've changed our mind. You know what I mean? Like, we're gonna.
Well, you know what? That goes.
You know?
That goes right back to the perception of the police right now.
Yeah.
I for a giant lack of better words, I think people are having that. Hey guys, we need to rethink this.
Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah.
Right. They listen. I always tell people this. I have so many names of kids generally that I've never met that have been shot.
Oh yes.
By police in my head. I know that the last meal of a kid I've never met across the country was Skittles. You know what I mean?
Yup.
That should drive you nuts. I'm gonna be honest. It took till now for me to just go. It's too much. I can't remember the names anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, Derek, I can't even comprehend any of that. My socioeconomic background, all of these things that go into me. If I'm upset, I can't imagine. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do. Yeah. No, I do.
If I'm upset,
yeah.
I can't imagine.
Yeah, I know. And
the only
sorry,
thing
go
I can
ahead.
do is listen.
Yeah, no.
The only thing I can do is listen. That's it.
Yeah, and well, I'll caveat that for you if you don't mind. I think
Sure.
You first listen, yes. Second, you need to act. And I think one of the
Yes.
conversations I was having with someone before was like, I've personally found myself in circles where people didn't know that I was Arab. And so they were saying disparaging things about Arabs because they thought they were in a safe space. I found myself in circles where people didn't know that I was Tejano, like a descendant of Mexico, but, Texas. And they were saying shit about Mexicans or Latinos or Hispanics or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, in those instances, obviously I was standing up for myself. But even if I've been in circles where they weren't even talking about something that pertained to me, like they were talking about black people, for instance, or something, you know, I spoke up and said, hey, that's not cool. Like, we don't.
Yes.
And sometimes I would, maybe not say it the right way. Like I would say, hey, well, we don't talk like that, and that's, I could probably say it a little better, but it's, again, that's what I mean when I say act because I've heard this from more than just you, acknowledging the privilege, and not just, acknowledging whatever form of privilege that it was that you came from or have at the moment, acknowledging that they have that, acknowledging that they're not from the majority of these marginalized places or can't really speak from a place of someone who's been on the other end of these discussions. Yeah. So the act is, I think, to correct on site. I think that's what it is.
Well, actually, and when I say listen, I mean
I understand.
That doesn't mean, this is one thing I've come across, right? And I'm sure maybe you have too. I've heard from people. But you're East Asian, you're Indian, you guys don't do this or that or this or that.
Right.
And you have to stop them and you have to remind them that my family came here because of the 1965 Naturalization and Immigration Act, right? Which abolished the national quota system and said that certain amounts of people, essentially with certain requirements for Indian Americans, it was education. We came to be your doctors, your lawyers, your whatever, right? But we chose to come here because of the opportunities that America afforded us. And that was a conscious decision by us. And it was because America afforded us something. And that's the difference. And you have to get that through people's heads. How did my family get here? Well, they bought plane tickets or they bought a boat ticket. That's not the same for everyone else in this country. Right. And the sooner we start to realize that as immigrants, as a model minority, right? Indian people like to be conservative because they have small businesses and they're fiscally conservative. But when it transfers over to the social side, I have to stop them and remind them that just because we got some of what's great about this country does not mean that everyone else got it or that they actively avoided it or that they don't want it. Right. It's because it was never offered.
Because it was never offered, yeah.
It was never offered, and to this day, it's really still not offered in full. I would argue.
No.
Look what's going on out there.
Yeah.
I'm in a white suburb, and predominantly Caucasian suburb, and I drives me crazy when I hear, but look, we're multicultural. You're here. No,
yeah, dude, I know. Okay, so one of the nights that I was out doing the protest hunting, I was downtown, and we were over in what is it called? Like Old Town kind of area, but closer to downtown, like off of LaSalle kind of thing. And we went in front of this really nice building, and this black couple came out. Okay. And they were just like shocked because they just came out of their building. They heard all the commotion. They came out of their building, and it was a Black Lives Matters, protest, and they were just so overjoyed. And if you go, for anyone who wants to see it, it's on. Just go look at. It was a Sunday. I can't remember what day it was, but it was Sunday, about a week ago, and. I think it was about a week ago, or the week before last. Sorry. It was a Sunday. Anyways, you'll see it on the tape because I ended up interviewing them. I asked them, I was like, hey, do you mind answering a few questions? And they basically said, it's really nice to see this here because we don't see anyone else that looks like us here. And I explicitly asked them, you guys live in this building? I assumed, but that old adage, assuming makes an ass out of you and me. I explicitly asked them, even though I saw them walk out of the building, clearly like not with like luggage, like they were visiting, right? Do you guys live in this building? Yes. Tell me what you think about this. It's great to see all these people here. No one else in this neighborhood looks like us. Definitely not in this building. That's what they were telling me. I literally, I shit you not, on the same tape, guys, go check this out. On the same tape, not even, 15, 20, 25 minutes later, we go to we were still in the same neighborhood. We go on another side. Two white dudes coming up, and can't remember if they were on bikes or not. Two white dudes coming up. They were watching everything happen too, and I was like, hey, can I answer a few questions, whatever. I said something about, what would you say, I'm paraphrasing, what would you say to people who would allude to the lack of diversity in the neighborhood or something like that? And the guy got so upset. Well, I would tell that person, you don't live here. You don't know. You don't live here. My neighbor is black. And he said, those people don't live here. And I let him talk. And then I said, hey, I got to be honest with you. I literally just talked to two people that live in this neighborhood who are black and say that their experience is there's no diversity in this neighborhood. And so it's kind of along like what you're saying when you're in your neighborhood and it's like, yeah, we got like my neighbor's Indian or whatever. We got diversity here. Diversity isn't like four people of color moving into your building.
Yes.
That's not diversity.
No, it's not. It's representation. That's really what it is. And this is one thing that's I've been lucky enough to get recently, which is Indian Americans have honestly in the last 5 years become a part of pop culture, have become, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. When I was growing up, when I was, when I think about the Indian people in pop culture, honestly, I always fall back to like Apu or like, no, really.
No, I understand.
There weren't a lot. And then like Aziz Ansari appeared and I felt a little better about myself. And then to be honest, it was Obama that made me even think politics were possible because it didn't look, if you grow up never seeing a president that looks like you, it's going to affect how you think about politics.
And I struggle with I struggle with challenging Obama. I know you were. I don't remember if I don't think we were live. Excuse me, but you said I'm one of the biggest Obama supporters ever. This kind of thing.
Yeah.
I was. I still am in the sense that I understand what his presence in that White House meant for a bunch of people, and I'm not trying to take any of that away from them or the accomplishments that he had on his own. But I believe it's very important, and this is just a little off topic, but I just think that it's very important to challenge the people in power, especially when they haven't really done like good things. Like I said, I mean, Obama took us from a human-led war to a drone-led war in the Middle East. So he just continued the shit that the red team was doing. And so I have beef with him for that. I also have beef with him for having both houses of Congress and the presidency and not enacting like the dopest change that he promised. Like, so a bunch of other things. So I fuck with Obama, but I really want to sit down with that guy and have a conversation with him, not on tape. You know what I mean? Yeah. So anyways, but
I will say, don't take my me saying I'm the biggest Obama fan ever as someone who will not critically think about the things he's done. So the drone strikes, I mean, there was an uptick in immigration arrests,
the bank bailouts, all that shit.
There's all sorts of stuff.
Car.
But on the basis of representation, I am seeing Indian congressmen. I'm seeing the color of the House of Representatives change in my lifetime, which is I'm optimistic about. And it's easy to get upset, but I look at how it's changed, and I look at who people are supporting now, more on the Democratic side than the Republican side. But you know what? If it shows up on the Republican side on the basis of representation, I probably will not disagree with them being there. You know what I mean?
Well, I think too, though. So this is where I want to just challenge you. As far as what you're saying, in the sense that estimates say that in 2050, the minority now will be the majority, and mainly Mexicans, okay, like Hispanics, Latinos, right? But that does include the black population growing in numbers as well. So I without accurate study to prove that it's like not because we're just making more babies and that's why we're inherently getting more people of color to be elected by sheer just numbers, right? Like, I don't want to say like, our representation is happening because these figures are, infiltrating a system that wasn't built for them, or if it's just by sheer numbers that there's just too many of us now. They can't just keep,
it can be both.
Right? You know what I mean? Like, so like that, right? But
I think it can be both.
Yeah. But I agree with your assertion that it is a beautiful thing to see representation. And I like that word. I don't use that enough. And I really appreciate you dropping that in my head, because that is what I think a lot of this can boil down to, is lack of representation. It's even something that when we're talking about policing, not to bring it back to that, but the thing about the police force not looking like the neighborhood in which it's policing. And so that changes the way that they interact with the people in that area. So it is important. And I do want to see more representation in our elected base. I mean, if you just look at, if you just take a picture now of like Trump's administration, there's not a lot of diversity in that thing. And the same could be said of the House of Representatives, though.
The interns. The White House interns are an indictment of what's going on. You look at Obama's interns, and you look at Trump's interns. It's not even like they're trying anymore. You know what I mean?
They're not. Did you see?
And that's hard for me. That's hard for me to watch. Grow up. And it's hard for most of our generation to grow up, watch Barack Obama come into office, watch a lot of things seemingly get better, watch everybody claim everything's getting better, and then to be slapped in the face, right, at what's coming, right? I look back and I just go, oh my gosh, me as a high school senior thought this country is just going to keep going and going and going. And it takes a little hindsight to understand that we are not a linear graph, and we never have been. We are going to go up and down. My weird patriotic streak in me is always going to say, we're going to end up on the top. That doesn't mean it's going to be easy, and it doesn't mean that every single little thing that I've ever wanted is going to happen, but it has to, or we don't continue to be around, right?
Yep.
We continue to kick upwards. We kick the rock up the hill, and for some reason, we're able to stop it just a little bit higher than before, and we're going to keep doing that. But with Trump, we let that rock roll down very far close to the base of the hill, and it's going to take a lot of work to bring it back up.
I think the hardest thing for people to understand is that this doesn't stop until we die. Meaning, you having to fight for whatever it is that you're fighting for, whether it's representation, whether it's access to healthcare, whether it's a living wage, whether it doesn't fucking matter. Whatever you're fighting for, even if I don't agree with it, your fight doesn't stop until you die. So that's what happened with Obama. The man got elected. Everyone stopped challenging him because they thought he was just going to save us. And then when Hillary lost, because again, nobody tried, because the media, everyone said Hillary had it in the bag. So why are people fighting for anything if we got it in the bag? People love to not do shit. I like to not do shit. I wish I could my bed is right here. I wish I could lay in that thing all day. But it doesn't work that way. I'll never get anything done. All right, and the same is true for our policy, right? If we want these changes to happen, we have to fight for them to happen, and it goes farther than just. And I know I've been saying voting fixes everything, but it's farther than voting, because okay, now you've elected this person into office. Now you have to hold them accountable and hold their feet to the fire until they make that shit happen. You know?
Sure.
So I don't know. I don't know if people are really ready for that. I think that's where a lot of people get turned off by politics, because it's a fucking 24-hour, 7-day a week, 365 type thing. Like, there's no days off, man. You know, maybe Christmas.
No, there is not really.
Yeah, I know.
If something, I agree with the sentiment that people have to work hard to find and continue to change it. Right. I'm going to rope back, though, to just, you know what? Some people might get tired. You know who's the least likely to get tired? All those young people that started those protests. Right? I hope. I can only hope. But
I don't know. You know, well, what happened to Occupy? Why did Occupy die? What do you think?
Okay, so I have a unique I went there. I went there for multiple days, the one in Chicago, and saw, and I was just a teenager at the time, but I remember being amazed that I in the course of like 5 minutes, I met an angry nurse, an angry teacher, and I think it was just an angry service worker, but it was three people that were so angry about the same thing that they all, like, you know, I was a kid at the time, and I was like, doesn't the teacher have to grade things? Don't you have to go waitress to make money? Don't you as a nurse have to be at a hospital? They were so screwed by that financial moment that they walked outside and said, I'm going to sit here until someone does something. And where did Occupy go wrong? Man, I've written papers and papers on it. But I think there's one key thing that I think most people agree with, which is strong leadership.
That's what I think about what's happening now. I really hope that when I was out at all these protests, one of the main tenets that they kept saying was, this doesn't have a leader. And as much as I would love for that to be true, I have yet to find in history, and I'm sure there's something that someone's going to pull up on Twitter now, but there are no leaderless movements. Like, there's got to be like this pinnacle, you know, like even the pyramids had one piece at the top, you know? And so, just even like an elected body, like a structural decision-making, you know, Congress, if you will.
And see, here's the thing, though, is like Occupy did have some of those sorts of things. They did have like, I believe, like a community council sort of thing where they would vote on things and resolutions and whatnot. I'm not looking for one man or two people or even like a council of 10 or... When I say leadership, I mean a group of people. It could be the whole crowd that sticks to something and works through it methodically to get it done. When I see these protests pop up all over the city, I'm happy, and it's the best thing ever. And I think that there's no more righteous thing you can do in these very moments. My question is, and I think you'll agree with me, is after this, which one of those people are going to start the petition and get it all the way to Springfield? Which one of those people? You know what? It's too early to know. It is. If you look at all the things the protests have done, just at face of being a protest, you could talk circles around me, right? You really could. There's so many things that have happened since then. From what I'm hearing is we used to have a cash bond problem in this state. Like people need cash to get out of jail.
Yeah.
The donation funds were overfilled,
Right.
And some of the organizations were saying, "All right, public, chill on this. We're good."
Yeah.
You know, that's the first time in history that we might have had too much bond money for people. And you can never have too much. We shouldn't
have that system in the first place. Like,
no.
That's a ridiculous system. Cash bail, cash bond.
If it wasn't for people like like the National Lawyers Guild and stuff, I don't know what protesters would do.
Right. Right.
But I do have to wrap up in the next few minutes.
Yes, that's fine. We'll get out of here.
That's okay.
Yeah.
But I do not want to discount what's going on now just because of failures I've seen before.
Oh yeah. I want them to learn. I want them to learn. What do they say? They say smart people learn from their own mistakes. Wise people learn from the mistakes of others. I want this change to happen as much as the people on the ground. But from what I saw there personally, there wasn't that organization there unless I just didn't see it. I'm not saying it's not happening. Yeah. I just didn't see it. And you know what? I'll be completely honest with you. I think a lot of people thought I was a cop because I just went out. I really, dude, I was dressed in all black. I had all this shit on me. And some people were like, I had a couple people tell me that. But regardless of the fact, I'm not saying it's not happening. I want it to happen. I want this change to happen. I want it to be concrete, and I want it to be the spark for a really big fire, and I say that figuratively, really big fire that burns away a lot of the fray of our democracy that sucks and shits on people. Yeah. So, yeah. Go ahead.
We're a young experiment, We're the youngest of all the experiments, and we're going to sit in... Me sitting at home in this chair saying, we're a young experiment, everything's going to be okay. That's not true.
Nah.
It's going to take hard work. And our generation, you know what? We've seen some things. I would say you've been a part of the endless wars. Our generation has seen things that have seemed insurmountable, right? Are we done with that? No. Can we be? I would say we're more ripe than ever too.
Right.
And so I guess I'll leave at this point, Derek. I got to thank you so much for letting me be on the show. I'd love to do it again.
Yeah, definitely.
For all the viewers watching right now, I will say it's a pretty bold thing to go out into the middle of those protests and just ask people human to human how they're feeling about things. We don't do it enough. If you're watching right now, I'm pretty sure he's taking donations. And the inner politician in me would be wrong to say that this man might need some of those funds to keep up the great content that he's doing.
Appreciate that.
To the city of Chicago, I say that continue protesting.
Yeah.
But afterwards, go to the ballot box.
That's the ballot box. So show us, before you get out of here, show us your shirt. I can read what it says so everyone else can see it. Yeah. I dig it. I am my ancestors' wildest dreams. That's awesome. I really like that shirt. That's a dope ass shirt. So Tejas, thank you for coming on, man. Very insightful. Really vibed with you when we went to school, and I'm glad that the internet has afforded us the opportunity to stay connected. And we will definitely do this again. So have a good evening.
Definitely.
Thanks for coming on. To everyone at home, thank you for coming and being a part of another installment of the DA Perspective. I'll just leave it there. As always, I may not always be correct, but at least I started the conversation. Peace.
Cheers. Have a good one.